Welcome back to Money for Life. I'm Kaylee Roberge.
And I'm Eric Roberge.
Today, we're going to give you some really solid guideposts that you can use if your goal is to increase your net worth. And I think for most of us, that does kind of capture what we're trying to do with our money. We're trying to create more wealth so that we can live more of the life that we want now and well into the future, too.
It's a source of freedom. Money is that source for us. And that means spending today, yes, but really growing that wealth so that we have the financial power throughout our life. Wealth, in this case, is powerful.
Let's jump right in just to the first one. And I think this is probably, you want to talk about powerful. This is the most powerful thing you can do because it is something that is in your direct control. You have the power to influence it. And we always talk about focusing on what you can control. So that very first guidepost, things that you can do, things that you can know if you want to increase your net worth, know that your savings rate matters more than your investment returns.
This is a tricky one for people because investment returns are certainly the headline. It's certainly the thing that people want to talk about at the cocktail party. It's what CNBC talks about. And it's not like returns don't matter, because they do, especially if it's positive versus negative. That's a big difference. But the amount you save every year that goes into your accounts that then get invested and earn money is so significantly more important for most people than the rate of those returns. It's a night and day difference because you need money to make money. So if you have a bunch of wealth, then yeah, the returns are going to drive the growth. But if you are creating wealth, if you're trying to build up your balance sheet, you need to shovel in the money so that it starts to earn money. And that shoveling in every year for 20, 30 years of your career at a good percentage, a high percentage, is vital to make this work.
Why do you think that people get hooked on the investment returns part, especially when you consider, like if you look at it objectively, that's the part that you can't control. You either have to get lucky, have a ton of technical knowledge, spend a ton of time, becoming a professional investor. It's not the easy way. The easy thing to do is just save more. And I guess that's kind of, I answer my own question as I was saying that, like, that's the logical approach. It's like an emotional pull, I guess, of you want to be like, oh, I had, these 10x returns. That's much more exciting than, yeah, I saved X more than you did.
There's a couple things there. One of them, I think, is people think, well, the money should do the work. If I'm saving, that sounds like me doing all the work. So they don't like that part of it, which I can understand. Money should make money. It should do the work for you. And you have to, again, have the pile of money that's in the accounts to be able to grow for you. I think the other thing is if they come to a financial advisor, especially, and say, all right, well, what are you going to do for me? And if I say, I'm going to tell you to save more money, and then you're going to save more money, or if I say, I'm going to get you 15% returns, which one sounds a lot better, right? So people are coming to advisors to say, earn me more money than I can earn on my own, which again makes sense to an extent. But the combination of the consistent earnings over time, which a financial advisor can help you with, or anybody that is a DIY investor that knows what they're doing from an asset allocation perspective can do, plus the consistent savings rate, percentage of your gross income saved into investment accounts every single year, is the killer combination there.
I think that touches on some key points, especially about having the money already invested and working for you is different than when you're creating it. And I think that's where a lot of the anecdotal stuff comes from. If you're out on the golf course and you're talking to this guy who has owned his business for 20 years and he's talking about all these things he's investing in, and you haven't started that, like you've got your 401k and maybe you have, 100 grand, 200 grand in cash ready to deploy, but you haven't started investing it yet. Like you can't compare what that person is talking about with what they're doing with their money to your situation because you've not had the benefit of time and the compounding returns. And I think people that's not how human brains are wired to think, like in exponential factors. We think very linearly. So it's not intuitive to understand how that compounding effect happens and how much time that it really takes when you're creating something from nothing. And I think we discount that too, of like when you're starting out, you're doing an amazing thing. You are creating something from nothing. That's incredible. And you've got to get some momentum behind that to get that flywheel effect. And that's where saving large percentages of your income comes into play. And I think the other part of what you were saying, Eric, with the people coming to advisors and they're like, well, all right, what's the advice that people don't like to hear? We'll save more. But I think what they're missing is that's not easy. That's why people aren't doing it on their own. And that's what I think about what we do for our clients is we make people rich because we give them the systems and the processes to make it doable. It's not just talk. You have a framework to work within. You've got accountability. You've got someone pushing you. You've got somebody checking your blind spots. You've got someone who's making sure you're doing all these little tiny actions consistently over time that build up to those big results in the long run.
Right. And what I could tell somebody is, yes, I can make you rich in 10 years. If you're saving appropriately, I can make you richer in 20 years and I can make you richest in 30 years. But on the news or in the paper, or again, with the stories you hear from other people, it's that person invested in this IPO company and the IPO took off and, 100x their dollars invested. And now they are super wealthy. That happened in 3 years. Yeah, that sounds great. Or I sold the business and it gave me $10 million because I sold the business. Although for that one, you didn't understand that it took 20 years to create the business, grow it to a certain value, and then sell it for that $10 million. So it definitely was a long-term investment, a long-term time horizon, but the actual dollars coming back to you was very quick because it was a transaction.
Yes. And all those things also, there's survivorship bias, right? You're not that's what you hear. You hear about all the people who did the 3-year IPO thing and made $1 million or the person that sold their business. What about the people that never got their business off the ground? What about the people who all the business deals went bad? Someone lost their business because it got sold out from under them by a co-founder. Some of these are worst case scenarios, but others are just regular stories that we don't hear about because no one's going to go around talking about that when they're at the networking event or at the pool party or all that kind of stuff. Same with the investment returns, right? You're going to hear about the person who picked the right stock at the right time and it blew up. They're going to tell you. Everybody else who lost money, they're not running around bragging about that. So that's also when you have to be really careful with these anecdotal stories, especially around investment returns, is it's not that it's not true that sometimes this investment does better than that one. It's that you don't hear about all the other times, which are much greater in number, that it didn't work out. So ultimately, your savings rate is going to matter more than your investment returns because it's something that you can control. It's something you have influence over, and it's something that can be steady, reliable, and consistent. Saving 25% of your income every year is going to beat saving 10% and crossing your fingers and hoping you get outsized returns, which it's just very unlikely to happen. And that's also a key thing, right? It's not saying that it can't happen or it never happens or it will not happen to anyone. But if you're playing the odds, you need to go with probability. And probability says your savings rate is going to get you farther than getting lucky, right? Not a lot of people win the lottery.
And just to put some numbers behind this too, because we've done this projection before where we were showing if somebody saves 25% of their income over 20 years and earns 6%, and someone else earning the same amount of money saves 10% of their income over that 20 years, that 10% saver has to earn 14 or 15% on their money every single year. So an average return of 14 or 15% to get to the same dollar value in wealth of the person who saved 25% every single year and earned only 6%. So if you really want to keep it in your control, you save more money and you have to earn a lot less, which is more reasonable to earn 6% over time than 14%. Forget it. You're not going to guarantee yourself 14%. No chance.
In a lot of this, we've been talking about time, right? Time in the market. And I think that leads us to this second guidepost of things to know, things to do. If you want to increase your net worth, it's to know that time beats timing. Time in the market is better than timing the market.
And this also sounds so much less sexy. You say, well, I just have to hold the money in the market and not do anything for 20 years versus jumping in and out and saying, all right, the market's at a peak and I'm going to pull out and then I'm going to jump back in with all my cash when it's at a bottom and then earn twice my returns. That all sounds great. And in theory, Yes, you would earn a lot more if you could do that and time things. The problem is we cannot time things. We can get lucky, but getting lucky over 5 years is different than getting lucky over 30 years. And the problem with getting lucky is that you can also get unlucky. And if you get unlucky just one time, you could wipe out everything, not just a couple bucks. So when it comes to timing the market, it's a loser's battle. And anybody that tells you they can always time the market is lying to you or lying to themselves. It's a very speculative bet. And with speculative bets come losses and gains in equal measure. So if you want a coin flip, great, go time the market. If you want guarantees, time in the market is what we're looking for.
And it's a loser's game, and it's a dangerous one too, because it's so tempting, because it all looks so obvious in hindsight, right? When you look back, you're like, oh, of course I should have jumped out of the market in March 1st, 2020, before everything went nuts March 15th. Like, obviously that was going to happen. But it's only obvious because you're looking back and you can see, again, that linear path that doesn't actually exist in real time in the present moment. Things are much, much harder to predict before they've happened than after, which sounds really silly when you say it like that. But that's what we do. That's what hindsight bias is. We look back and we're like, oh, clearly point A to point B. Why didn't I see that? And it's not that clear when it's happening.
That is correct. Although I want to point out one reference to the COVID piece where February 19th or 20th is when it started to go down, and March 23rd is when it bottomed out. So that was
I should have left the dates to you. Thank you for the specifics.
Yeah, well, I will never forget that period of time.
Yeah.
Nor will I forget the 2008 to 2009 piece, where September 2008 till March 2009, there was significant 40+% losses over a 6-month period. It's just mind-boggling. And most people didn't time that correctly. And those that did are going to yell really loud about it because they've been trying to time the market and yelling about when the market drop is going to happen for 20 years, and they get one right. And now they're the golden child.
That's the thing with people who can make these predictions. They're not on the hook for anything when they're wrong. So they're incentivized actually to say it over and over again. Like, okay, it's going to drop now. It's going to drop now. It's going to drop now, because there's so much of that noise that people tend to not call them out on it every time they're wrong. And then the one time that they're right, it's like, oh my goodness, this person predicted it. It's like, well, no, if you actually go back and look at what they're saying in the context of like this person's career or this person's stint on CNBC, whatever, you can see that they've been saying this over and over again. But we don't usually see that. What we usually see is a quote in the Wall Street Journal of like, oh, esteemed economist so-and-so says this about the market, and this other expert over here says this. Like, we don't see that one person's statements and comments and predictions lined up chronologically over the past 20. And we usually don't fact check, well, how many times are they right? We're just looking at what's kind of in front of our noses, which can be really misleading. So ultimately, with guidepost number 2 here, know that your long-term participation in the market, that's what's going to lead to successful investment outcomes, not outguessing everyone else. And if you're ever tempted to do it, I think remembering that last piece is always good. Of if you're going to time the market, that means you know more than the entire market and everyone participating in it, every other retail investor, every other professional investor, every other institution that is pouring, I don't know how much, crazy amounts of resources into knowing what the market's going to do next. I don't think, no offense to any one person out there, but I don't think you as an individual are going to know more than the entirety of all market participants.
Unless you have insider information, which is then probably illegal to trade on.
Yeah. All right. So the third guidepost that we have for increasing your net worth, this is more of a defensive move, I think, but I think it's really important, and it's to plan for the unexpected to happen.
Planning for the unexpected sounds like, well, you're just a pessimist. You shouldn't plan for the unexpected. You should be positive, and everything should be positive about your plans. That is a setup for failure. Not because you are a pessimist or an optimist, but because planning is about the future, and the future is unknowable. So if we think we are going to convince ourselves of this assumption is fact, we are already off on the wrong foot. We have to understand that the assumptions are just that. They're assumptions, they're guesses, they're calculated guesses, they're not just out of the blue random choices. They're based on historical data, they're based on future speculation and research. but they're still guesses. And with that means we need to build in buffer room so that when the plan inevitably does not go as we expected, because the assumption for our savings rate or our income or inflation or the investment rate of return or the amount of expenses we have changes, which it definitely will, we can just continue moving forward on the path because we've built in the buffer room. So the path is quite large.
Yeah, absolutely. Because the unexpected will happen because you cannot possibly know everything. As you said, the future is unknowable. Those things that happen, life's curveballs, they don't wait for you to be in a good position to catch them, right? You just have to roll with it. And most of this stuff happens like at the worst possible time. And I think what all these things have in common that we've been saying so far is it's really about probability, right? Like, and probability, not necessarily what's probable. All of these things that we've been talking about, it's about probability. It's not about necessarily what's possible. It's about what's probable. So if you're looking at investment returns, is it possible that you earn 30% year over year? I guess it's possible. It's not impossible. Is it probable? No. So that's not the game that you want to play. Same with timing the market. Is it possible to time the market correctly to jump in and out and avoid the worst days and hit all the best days? Possible. Is it going to happen to you? Very, very unlikely. And then the same thing with planning for the unexpected. Are things always going to go your way? Almost most certainly not. So you can't expect that it's all going to go smoothly. And like you said, Eric, it's not about thinking pessimistically, it's probabilistically. You have to understand that of all the things that can happen in life, all the incredible possibilities, like the infinite amount of events that can unfold, they're not all going to be what you want. So if you plan for that and you have the financial flexibility to handle it, it's not as much of a negative impact when negative events show up. So are there things that we can do, tangible things that you see with clients' financial plans or even our own that increase financial flexibility? Like how do you actually make sure that you can catch the curveball when it comes your way?
A couple things. I mean, just looking at one, emergency reserves or cash on hand. We could identify the lowest possible emergency reserve amount that we can get by on, both emotionally and physically. Or we could say, well, here's the number, and let's add $15,000 to it or $30,000 to it. So now we have our drop dead emergency reserve number plus some slush fund buffer room so that when things come up, we can move forward with them and not say, well, I need to wait 5 months before I can save for that because I don't have the cash available because I'm so tight on my cash amount. Now, someone else might say, well, you should have as little cash as possible in your account because you want earning as much money as possible, and the cash in your bank account is going to be at risk of losing to inflation. So inflation rate of increase is going to be more than the money, the interest rate on your bank cash. That is also probably true. But if we're trying to build in buffer room and plan for the inevitable unexpected things that happen, that's one way. Have more cash on hand than you think you need, period. Separately, we can look at longer term projections to say, all right, my expectation is that I earn this amount of money. And for a lot of our clients, they say, well, I've been earning probably 10% growth on my income every year and I'm getting promotions. So looking at my income growth at like 2.5% or 3% is very unrealistic and it's too conservative. There's the buffer room. If we can make a plan work for just inflation growth on your income and you get more than that, then we can alter the plans once that actually is achieved and it's icing on the cake versus having it be disruptive to the plan if you're planning for your income being way up here and it's actually a much lower rate of growth over time. And that goes for inflation, right? If you think it's going to be 3%, maybe you build in 4%. If you think your savings rate is going to be 25%, maybe you assume 20%, because in that case, assume that you're saving less money because that's going to be a more conservative approach and build buffer room. And if you can save more, then again, the world's your oyster and you can choose proactively to be intentional about the extras that you have. But you knew that your base plan was solid because you build in all these little buffer rooms in all these different areas.
Yeah, I think if your plan works when you're expecting to earn less than you think you will and save less than you think you will. If the plan still works, then great, because if you earn more, then you're golden. If you save more, you're in good shape in the future. Metering your assumptions is a good way to build buffer room into your planning. And I think on the expense side, probably assuming you'll spend a little bit more than you think you will, that also creates some buffer room. I think one last tangible thing that you can do right now to give yourself more financial flexibility is to save as much as you can when you can. Don't wait thinking like, oh, I'll earn more next year. I'll be able to catch up on my savings then, because something happens. Something is always going to happen to eat up available cash flow. It's almost like that idea of like work takes the time you give it, it's going to fill that space. Money seems to kind of work the same way of like, if you just have money sitting around and you're like, I'll save it later. No, something else is going to come along and eat it up first. So saving more than you think you need to when you can do it gives you the flexibility to cut back later, because it's much easier to drop your savings down than it is to really ramp it up, because you've got to play catch up because you kind of procrastinated or put it off. And it also allows you to change. That's definitely what happened with us personally. For a long time, we weren't sure about having kids. We didn't know if we would. For a little bit, I didn't want to, and then I changed my mind. And during all of that time, we were saving aggressively so that when we had our daughter and we suddenly had many more child expenses than we initially thought we would, it was okay to drop that savings rate down and use that money to spend on these new expenses, because we had spent almost 10 years really aggressively saving every last available dollar and keeping our lifestyle expenses very, very low. That created that buffer, that literal buffer room that you're talking about, Eric, where we could say like, all right, we can cut back on savings. It's not going to disrupt our long-term plan because we front loaded it so aggressively. So that's another way that you can create some flexibility for yourself, is don't delay savings. If you have the money to save, save it now. It just makes things easier every step forward you go.
That reminds me too of just the understanding of starting to save early and often versus starting to save later in life, so that if you're 20 years old and you're starting to save, you could probably get by with saving 10% of your income for the next 50 years until retirement. If you start at 40, you might make it. If you're saving 25%, it might need to be 35% of your income for the next 20 years to make it. And so if you want to give yourself that flexibility, that buffer room, then you start to save early and often and as much as you can while you can, so that in those later years, you don't have to save a good amount. When you're in your peak earning years, maybe you can say, you know what, we can actually spend this money. We can grow our lifestyle right now so that we can live well because we've worked hard, we can enjoy it. And that's certainly what I feel like we're doing now. And we spend more than we've ever spent. And we're still saving a good amount, but we're just not saving as much because we saved so significant. I mean, upwards of like 30 to 40%, even more of our income on an annual basis for the years that we could, before kids, before owning a house, before big travel things that we do now.
Yeah. And I will say, if this is something that someone hasn't started yet, it can sound really daunting and really awful and not fun. On day one, it probably is all those things, but it's like anything else. It's a habit. So the more that you do it, the easier it becomes. Starting, like, the best time to start is always yesterday. The second best time is today. And saving something is always better than saving nothing. So if you're thinking like 25% of my income, I'm not saving anything right now, that's a big leap to go from 0 to 25. So don't make that leap. Make a baby step. You adjust your 401k contribution so it's 5%. Set aside whatever you feel like you're comfortable with. If it's $100 a month contributing to a taxable brokerage account, great. Like if it's 0 to 100, perfect. That's awesome. And you can always ratchet it up from there. And I think that just kind of trusting the process and knowing that it is a habit, and it's going to be hard at first, and then it feels a little bit easier. And even for me, at least, it tipped over into like, man, this is a slog, to this is really gratifying. Like, look how much I can save. It was something that I felt good about and something I felt proud about. And I still do, like, every time that we sit down and have like our kind of personal financial planning meetings where we're looking at, all right, here's how much we need to save. Like, I'm always pushing for it to be a little bit more. And it feels really good when we can be like, all this money, like, straight to investments or straight to savings. So I think that can be something hopefully that you could look forward to if this is all kind of new, this idea of saving more and pushing yourself. It's almost like pushing yourself in the gym, right? The first day, not fun. By, the 50th day, you're feeling good, like you feel good about yourself and it's enjoyable. So hopefully you can get that effect too with your money.
Let's hope so. 'Cause that's definitely the benefit of doing it to start.
Yeah. So our fourth guidepost for increasing your net worth would be something to not do. We've been talking about all the things to do right. This is something to avoid, and it's do not count on your variable income for your fixed expenses.
This is a big one, especially with our clients who often have a significant bonus, variable, or commission, variable, or equity compensation like restricted stock units, grants, variable. The stock price is bouncing up and down, the performance of the company or you does poorly, your payout is drastically different than you expect. So to count on that variable income as part of your very fixed expenses, meaning you pay for these expenses consistently over longer periods of time, is setting yourself up for failure. Instead, it's a challenge, right? This is a challenge because the instead would ideally would be set up your fixed expenses with your fixed pay. But if half of your pay is variable, then you're making a lot more money than your lifestyle would show if you're only basing your normal expenses off of the fixed. So there's a little bit of wiggle room here, but I think you should err on the side of try to build your normal budget, your mortgage or rent, your car payments, your child's school, your food, groceries, gym, all the things that you're paying all the time and build it around your fixed expenses, and then have the variable piece be something that you get to use as icing on the cake to save more, to go on a big trip because you've made the bonus money. And we can talk about tactics for doing this, but I think that's baseline what I would recommend.
Right. Because your bonuses and your equity packages are not guaranteed. They can disappear. Your mortgage isn't going to disappear, though. It's going to still be there. So I think basing definitely any big financial decisions that are new, I think that's where you use the most caution and not expecting or overly relying on variable income to carry through a very long-term fixed decision like a house. That's something you've got to be very, very careful about. But then even layering in, like Eric, you said, car payment. Like, I think people need to be cautious about that. Just because you made X this year doesn't mean you're going to make the exact same or more next year, especially when you're dealing with something like equity comp, which fluctuates based on the value of the company, or, your commissions, your bonuses, that's performance dependent. Hopefully you have just as good of a year, but who knows? So you had mentioned like tactics for kind of structuring that. Do you have anything in mind when you're saying that? Is there something, because I know this comes up with clients all the time, like almost everyone that we work with has equity compensation or they're making some kind of bonus or commission. So how do you guide a client through thinking about expenses versus savings when there's not like, well, I know I make X amount, or it's like, well, it kind of fluctuates every year.
Well, a couple of things. One, I mean, that's why we use percentage of gross income saved, so that whatever money you make in a given year, 25% of that should go towards savings. And if you make less than that, the 25% is a lower dollar amount, but it's the same percentage. So that moves up and down with your income. So that's an automatic adjustment factor built into your savings rate strategy. When it comes to housing, one thing that we make sure to do is identify the variable piece of your income. Because we say we want you to spend 20 to 25% of your gross income on housing at the top end, meaning principal, interest of your mortgage, taxes, and maintenance and home insurance all included there. So 25% of your gross income all in. That's where we would identify the variable piece and then probably remove some, if not all, of the variable piece to calculate the percentage. So your fixed gross income, what percentage of your housing is it compared to that? And if you're saying, well, 50% of my income comes from bonus or commissions, and I know I'm not going to make zero there, right? I have 95% confidence that I'm going to make 25% of that or 50% of that. We can add that back into the countable income amount when we calculate that percentage for the house. But we're not going to do 100% because now we're saying, yeah, you can afford your house if you make your max OTE, right? Your on target earnings. Great. If you don't, you lose your house. Probably not a good setup for a plan. So let's not go that route. It's a very challenging thing. And I think one thing too that you want to do is when your big bonus or payout hits, budget for the future. So, example, a lot of people get a bonus in March. So if you're making $250,000 and you get a $250,000 bonus and it hits in March, you now have guaranteed yourself that you got that bonus this year. Take that 250, save the right percentage of it right away, put some of it maybe into your slush fund to spend on whatever comes up, and then plan for that trip and segment that money that you need for the trip into a separate account so that you've already basically supplied yourself with your savings, your normal budget, and some of these extra expenses that you choose to do with the bonus that just hit, and it doesn't get used in everyday life and get squandered. And then next year you're expecting that same money and it doesn't happen, then you just get a little flustered there. So it's great to nail the projected use of the bonus or the big lump sum payment right when it hits, because it's guaranteed at that point. It's not earmarked for anything at that point, and you're free and clear to do what you will.
I think also inherent in that is you're using that money that came in to pay, like you're projecting it forward, right? And you might have to do some work to get yourself out of the cycle if you're in it. But I think where people get really, really tripped up, if they're self-employed, if they make variable income, whatever it is, where you don't have necessarily a same, like all of your pay is coming in a W-2 regular paycheck every month, is that you end up, you get your bonus and now you're paying for the last 6 months. That just happened. Like you're paying off credit card bills, or you're paying for the trip you already took. So I think it's really game changing when you can switch how you're managing your cash flow to be forward looking, and any money that's coming in is being used to address expenses that you can see coming, or Eric, like you said, put in a slush fund for the expenses that are probably going to pop up, but you just don't know exactly what they are right now. And the savings too. Like if you get that big bonus, all right, I'm going to take my chunk, I'm going to put X amount in savings, I'm going to hit my 20% target or my 25% target, all done for the year. You don't have to worry about that anymore. So I think trying to get into that cycle with your cash flow management where you're using money that's coming in on a forward-looking basis rather than playing catch-up, that is a really, really powerful shift that you can take to kind of change the course of your financial life, really.
It's a much better place to be in, and it's less pressure there. So maybe we should title that strategy "Take Your Chunk," the Take Your Chunk strategy.
Yeah. Well, we'll discuss that. I don't know if that sounds appealing, but all right. So the next one, or a fifth guidepost, is going to be to make sure that you are the one who's determining what actually matters to you.
This one's a very broad, loaded statement that I don't know how to summarize very quickly. But you shouldn't do what your neighbor's doing. Try to keep up with the Joneses. You shouldn't do what your parents think you should do or what they did necessarily, unless it was a really great thing to do. And you certainly shouldn't do what CNBC or the news tells you to do or social influence tells you to do, unless, again, it's what you already want to do. So you got to look inside and say, what do I want to do? What do I actually value? What makes me feel good, and how I spend or use my money? And how do I bring that into my financial plan? Because if you can align your spending and your savings with the things that bring you joy and that you value and that are priorities, that true priorities for you, you're going to feel a lot better than if you're trying to do something because someone else influenced you to do said thing.
I think there's a really good point in there that I think there's a fine line between being influenced and being inspired. You know, like looking around and seeing what other people do, it could spark like, oh, that's amazing. Like I feel really motivated by that. I'm energized by that, and that's great. And then the other side of that line is just being kind of led astray or letting comparison what is that saying? Comparison be the thief of joy, sort of a thing. Like when you're comparing yourself and you're feeling like you're coming up short, that can lead you to make financial decisions that aren't really aligned with what you actually wanted to do. And it was, again, you were saying, like a priority set by someone else. And I think you can get in a lot of trouble that way in terms of like personal fulfillment and personal finances if you are, you know, letting those values kind of be set by someone else. I think it's a critical thing to keep in mind that you're the one who's setting how you allocate your resources, whether that's money or it's time or it's energy. And if something is not aligning with, and when we say what's important to you, to me, that means like a core value, like something that is inherent about who you are and who you operate as a person, what you think is, you want to orient your life around. So it's not something like, it's not little stuff, and it's not necessarily stuff that changes a lot over time. It's more things like community or family or wellness or learning or growth. Those are all kind of core values. So you can see where some activities, like the easiest one that comes to mind to me is spending on stuff. That's usually not aligned with any kind of core value unless it is facilitating something that does tie into a core value. So I think an example of that is last Christmas, my daughter and I, we went to Target and we bought a ridiculous amount of gingerbread house supplies. Like this was, I think it was like $300 that we spent at Target. But we bought all of this stuff and then had Eric, your sister, and her family and all of her girls. We had everybody over and we had like this big gingerbread making party where everybody got their own gingerbread house. And that was part of the expense. I didn't want to bake them myself. So I bought them, save time. That was also a value of mine. I value my time. So we had everybody over. All the girls had so much fun. It was like a whole afternoon that we got to spend together. So yes, I spent a lot of money on stuff, but it was facilitating a core value, which is family for us and making sure that our daughter is close to her extended family.
That's a perfect example. And two, you don't necessarily have to know, because you don't know until you know what you value or what feels good to spend your money on. So there's a sort of a trial period too. And as long as you don't go crazy about like committing significant amounts of money to something that you may or may not like, I think this is okay. For example, you don't know what kind of trip you want to take. So you get a recommendation from your neighbor who had a great time down in Punta Cana. And then you go down to Punta Cana and you're sitting there for 7 days by a pool, drinking coconut milk, and you've just had enough. Speaking from experience.
I was going to say, you're not speaking from personal experience at all, are you?
But it's that kind of thing, right? Like we took this amazing trip. On paper, in a magazine, it would be an amazing trip, right? A beautiful place. It was very enjoyable to an extent, but the downside was that we didn't do anything. We weren't active. We were sitting around all day, and only so much of that you can drink, and your body my body starts to get stiff. So I needed to be active. So we learned from that. It was a great learning experience. Say like, we did it, check mark. We don't necessarily want to do that specific type of thing again. We like tropics, but we don't like sitting in tropics. And so next time, maybe we do something that's much more active and engaged with the local, I don't know, wherever we're at, like towns or villages, and try to be more of a local for a little bit. And then maybe do some hiking. And that would be a much better fit for us for the same or more money because we value that kind of trip. So test the waters.
Good advice, because life experience as you accumulate it, very, very valuable, even if sometimes you do have to spend some money to do it. And I think that's kind of like a sidebar of like spending money isn't bad, right? Like a lot of personal finance literature are blogs, things like that, kinds of demonizes spending money is a bad thing. It's not good or bad. It's not right or wrong. It's what works and what doesn't work for you. And I think that what works and doesn't work relies on context. Like, how much are you saving? How much are you investing? If you're hitting your goals, then who cares how much you're spending? It doesn't really matter. So context is everything there. And I think it all comes back to how you use your money, and spending is part of using it. All right. So for our last guidepost here, if you want to grow your net worth, would be to keep in mind that the best financial plan is not necessarily one that accurately predicts the future. It's one that will successfully adapt to whatever unfolds in that future.
This point goes back to what we made comments on earlier as far as the future is unknowable and we have to make assumptions about the future. And so we should build in buffer room about those assumptions and about the plan itself so that we can adjust as things come up. And I think the adaptability is such a key piece of a strong financial plan that's probably underutilized, underrated, underdiscussed. Because it's almost like I want to adapt. So I want to plan for adapting because I know that what I believe, what I think, what I know today about myself is going to be different than what I believe, what I know, what I think about myself in the future, or what I want and the values that I have for my family. So things are going to evolve. And if growth is one of our values, then we should be planning on growing and expanding. And therefore, adaptability is vital inside the plan so that you can still live powerfully inside of that adapted life that you have, whatever that looks like down the road.
What a great point, because so many of us, whatever our specific financial goals are, I would bet money that most of them are not. Keep things exactly as they are. Change nothing, status quo from here on out. Like almost everyone's goal is centered around some kind of change, some kind of shift. So knowing that, you need to be in a position to financially accommodate it. And how we do that is everything we've talked about here, relying on your savings rate, not your investment return, optimizing for flexibility because you want that change, whatever it is in your life. These are all really important things to guide the specific actions and the specific tactics that you might take, especially when you can keep in mind that that's kind of the goal. You're looking for some kind of change, whatever that looks like in your own life.
I think that's one of the dirty little secrets in the financial planning world for a lot of advisors who like to show value and insight is that they use these financial planning softwares to run projections, which are linear in nature by default, meaning everything is the same every single year. It's an average rate of return. It's an average income and nothing changes. And what you say you want today is what you say you want in 10 years, which again is not true. So to give someone a false sense of confidence that their plan is going to work in a linear fashion going forward is basically setting themselves up for failure as well. And that's why we at Beyond Your Hammock do more modular planning. Like we can run long-term projections to say like, we are generally on track. We are looking at the right trajectory here based on what we think we want, but we are building the flexibility. We are trying to figure out like, all right, for the next 5 years, like how does this look? And if we do this for the next 5 years and then continue on with our regularly scheduled plan, does that still work? Okay, it does. So let's keep that. There's an anchor point in the middle that is a home base track, but then you want to be able to swing outside of that home base track to allow for that adaptability. And that's where the modular planning really comes in. And that's why we have very specific conversations with our clients periodically throughout the year so that we can have those conversations and listen for the evolution and the change in their wording and what they do and don't say so that we can help them build adaptability into their plan because we know it's going to be important.
Absolutely. And if that sounds like something that you want to, this is a perfect time to remind you that we do this for our clients and you can get a little peek into it. If you go to beyondyourhammock.com/schedule, that is a great place to go to request an initial call with us to see how you can optimize your finances as well and implement these 6 guideposts that we discuss to growing your net worth, making sure that you're achieving the goals that are important to you and enjoying more of what you want in life now while still planning responsibly into the future. Thanks for listening to another episode of Money for Life, hosted by Eric Roberge, CFP and founder of Beyond Your Hammock, and me, Kaylee Roberge. Our show is produced and edited by Steve Stewart. If you want to learn more about wealth management and hiring your own personal financial advisor, visit beyondyourhammock.com. And now for the legal stuff. This podcast is for informational purposes only and does not constitute financial, legal, or tax advice, and may not cover all critical, complete details of every situation discussed. The views expressed by guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect those of the host or the podcast. Please consult a qualified professional about your specific situation before making any financial decisions based on this podcast or any other educational content designed for a general audience.